Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing today?
Great.
My name is Alita Williams, and I'm the president-elect of Rotary One. And I would like to call our 5,645th meeting to open. And our thought of the day is being done by Bob Westhorpe.
Good morning, all. As many of you long-term Rotarians know, one of my objectives is to read a book on every president. And it's quite easy to do it for some presidents, Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, the Roosevelts, on up to our modern time. And this summer, I had an opportunity to walk through one of my favorite bookstores and gravitated to the biography section. And lo and behold, there was a book on John Adams. Not any John Adams, but John Quincy Adams, who was our 6th president. Looking around the room, I don't see anyone near the age of 12. At 12, John Quincy Adams was in Paris and going to school. Of course, it helped that his dad was ambassador to France. But anyhow, in a very short period of time, he mastered several different languages and was called upon to go with our new ambassador to Russia, and be his interpreter, since at that point in time, French was the primary language. And we fast forward on John Quincy, and he suddenly is ambassador to various countries and picking up more languages. And German was a little difficult, but got it under control, and Dutch was reasonably done. And then all of a sudden, he's called back to the United States to become Secretary of State. And as that term evolved, he helped draft several of the very important documents in the government of this new country called the United States of America. Then he was nominated for president, and elected president, and served 4 years and lost a very heated election to Andrew Jackson. Well, what does a person do when they've basically been retired from chief executive of the United States? And that plagued him, but he went back and lectured to his alma mater at Harvard, and then was asked to run for the House of Representatives from his district in Massachusetts, which he did, and served for many years, and literally passed away in the chambers during a session. Well, this just sort of scratched the surface on John Quincy. He was interested in an awful lot of things, and astronomy, language. He was very astute, I guess we'll say, poet. And so the House of Representatives gave him time to pursue some of these other things. Well, what does that have to do with us today? And I look around the room and I see a lot of people that probably are working pretty hard. And I look around the room and I see a lot of people like myself that are pretty old and decrepit, aged, and probably are retired or should be retired. So as I look at this and think about where everybody is in this stage of thing called life, I think of John Quincy Adams and the idea that he always had something else that he wanted to do. And I think that since at the time of his passing, he was the oldest person who was president who was a president and died later. He was 83, 84. He was soon eclipsed by Herbert Hoover, and now Jimmy Carter is oldest president. But anyhow, the point being that many of us are very busy. Many of us are sort of busy. And if we think of things that we want to do to keep our mind active, we end up having a much more interesting life and exciting life for ourselves than we do if we just sit at home and watch the TV.
Thank you, Bob. So, as we all know, the Rotary One International Convention registration is now open. For those in the room and on Zoom, can everyone raise their hand and tell me who's gonna go to Australia with us this year? I'm going. All right. That's exciting. The link, they're gonna drop the link in the chat to register, and it's also in the gyrator. We would love to see as many of our members there as possible so that we can have a great time. On your tables, there's a two-sided sheet. One is the QR code to this week's gyrator, and the other side is our QR code, which takes you to the Rotary One Foundation donation page, which helps us to do the great work that we do in the city of Chicago and around the world. And next, for our guests, we would do our best to get to all of the questions that we have in the room. Please honor our speakers' time and keep your questions succinct, one question per person. For those on Zoom who may have questions, you can drop them into the chat, and then we will also make sure that your questions are given to our speaker. We will take all questions at the end of his remarks. And if Eric could come up to introduce our wonderful speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Alita. How's everybody doing today? Excellent, excellent. Very good. Well, NanoGraf technologies first piqued my interest when I saw a friend post a news article on LinkedIn. And actually, I'm going to interrupt my first sentence here already just to say that some of us were at an event at Rotary International headquarters last night, and John Hugo referred to Rotary as the original LinkedIn from 1905. And I just thought that really resonated with me, and it's really true. So I saw this article on LinkedIn that a friend posted that told me the following. Chicago headquartered NanoGraf Technologies, which claims it has enabled the world's most energy dense 18650 lithium ion cell battery. I don't really know what that is, but I know it's a battery. Will open the first large volume silicon oxide factory in the United States. At peak production, NanoGraf will produce 35 tons of them per year. NanoGraf's new US high-performance silicon anode materials factory, which is under construction, is in Chicago's West Loop neighborhood. And it was a $10 million US Department of Defense contract that made this new 17,000 square foot factory possible. So that's what I read, and that got me interested. And so my friend graciously connected me with Chip Breitenkamp, the president of NanoGraf. So now Chip, in addition to being president, he leads the technology development for the company while also managing customer and partnership efforts for the company. He's got years of prior experience assisting customers in the development and manufacturing of some of the world's best-selling transformative consumer electronic and medical device products at companies like Exponent Inc. He also previously co-founded and served as Chief Technology Officer of Intazyme Technologies, which is a biotech company. As a researcher, and I know that there are some patent lawyers out there, actually between Rotary and the overall Union League Club, there's probably hundreds of patent lawyers out there, so they should be excited to meet you as an inventor with 20 patent families, representing 28 issued US and international patents and 18 peer-reviewed publications. Chip received a PhD in polymer science and engineering from the University, UMass Amherst, and a BS in polymer science from the University of Southern Mississippi. Please welcome Chip Breitenkamp.
I was telling someone that I give a lot of talks to investors, scientists. This is my first Rotary Club, so thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Is there a, should I switch slides?
You can just say next slide.
Perfect. So yeah, first of all, thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here. Just a little bit about our genesis as a company. We are a spin out of Northwestern University. We've been around for 10 years now. In fact, we were talking earlier, Samir Mayakar, who's now deputy mayor, was one of the co-founders of the company and still chairman of the company. And what we do is we make materials that go into lithium-ion batteries. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about science today, a little bit about some of the markets where batteries are really important. And I think more importantly, even if you don't love either of those things, we can at least tell you about some really interesting, cool technology that's being developed here in Chicago, and that I hope and think will change the world. So maybe next slide. Perfect. 5 years ago, I would give this slide in a manner to where I was trying to convince people that electrification is the future. I think at this point in 2023, we all realize that that's already happening. If you take a look in your pocket, I bet everyone in this room has a smartphone. In fact, I was really shocked to know that 85% of all Americans now own a smartphone. And I think an even more staggering statistic is worldwide, they're selling 1.5 billion smartphones every year, which is incredible. Every one of those has a battery. That battery is central to making that work and enabling global communication, or communication in this room if you're texting someone right now. I think the other thing that's really transitioned over the last, I'd say 3 to 4 years, is the reality that electrification of vehicles is going to happen. It's already happening. I think we're still low single digits in terms of new car sales that are electric. But I think if we take a look at projections right now, it depends on who you talk to, but we're looking at around 50% of all new vehicles that are sold in 2030 will be electric. That vehicle is driven by a battery. That battery is the majority of the cost. It actually controls the performance or enhances the performance of those vehicles. Batteries are central to that. And I think looking even further out, in terms of this nexus of electrification, renewables are already a growing part of our economy, or powering our economy. I was really lucky recently to be able to do a pretty massive road trip. I think you've heard I'm from Mississippi. That's where I went for my undergrad, but I drove home. Then I had the fortunate ability to drive through northern Texas out to San Francisco, then back through Wyoming and Iowa. I think if you haven't been to these parts of the country, you would be shocked at how much renewable energy is already, how much infrastructure is already there, and it's growing. And the reality is the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So batteries are really, again, a central part of tying this all together, being able to store that energy and use it when we need it. Maybe next slide. So a lot of people here probably you've probably heard of lithium ion batteries. You may not know what a lithium ion battery is and how it works. This slide up here just shows the basic components of a lithium ion cell. And it's actually really simple, surprisingly simple actually. There's only 4 components in a lithium ion cell. There's a cathode, there's an anode, there's a separator in between those 2 components, and then there's a liquid electrolyte. At least currently there's a liquid electrolyte that shuttles lithium ions back and forth between that cathode and the anode. So when lithium is being shuttled from the anode to the cathode, it's giving off electrons, creates electricity, and that's what powers your mobile phone. It's important to note here that chemistry really, it's a simple design, right? There's not a lot of components here, but the chemistry of each one of these components is critical to how the battery performs, right? And I could go through, all the examples of different cathodes that are used for electric vehicles, the trade-offs, or how electrolytes and the choices of electrolytes affect, if you're lucky enough to own an electric vehicle, when it's cold outside, you realize I'm not getting the same battery performance as I normally do. That's because of your electrolyte. And I think the focus of this talk, simply because we do anode materials, is on this anode. And traditionally, the anode in a lithium ion cell has been graphite. I think we all kind of know graphite, this really unsexy black powder, but it stores lithium pretty well. It's fairly inexpensive. Problem being, it doesn't store a whole lot of lithium. And that's really limited the capacity of the cell. And that's where NanoGraf comes in. So maybe next slide. It's kind of a busy slide here, but like graphite, this is actually what our powder looks like. It's this, just very black, nondescript stuff. We mix it in with graphite. And the key thing to know about the material that we're making here in Chicago is it's a silicon-based material, and silicon itself can hold about 10 times as much lithium as graphite can. And that's, again, if you're thinking about increasing the capacity of your battery, you need to be able to store more lithium. That's what our material does. And in fact, our particular material stores about 4 times more lithium than traditional graphite. And what we've done is we've developed a material that not just stores more lithium, but it blends with graphite. It works in existing lithium ion battery manufacturing processes, which again, was shown here. Everything is sort of mixed in water. A lot of people are surprised by that, but again, fairly simple process. You mix your graphite, water with some additives, you coat electrodes on a roll-to-roll process, calendar it, meaning you're just squishing that down, and then it gets rolled up, and then it goes into a can. And there's lots of different types of lithium ion cells. The most commonly seen one looks like this. It's a little bigger than a AA battery. So if you have fortunate enough to have a Tesla Model S, you pulled out your battery pack, you'd have about 7,500 of these little guys powering your vehicle. So I'll just send this around in case anyone is interested. But this is what we're doing. We're developing a material. You'll never know what's in there, but when we put it in there, that cell will hold anywhere between 20 to 40% more power than the very best cell that you're going to get from a Samsung or a Panasonic or an LG. And I think that's why people are excited about what we're doing here, and again, why we're trying to scale this quickly and really make an impact on products that need better batteries. Maybe next slide. This is a very sciencey slide here, I will warn you, but I think the point here is being, silicon already exists in the marketplace today. Again, if you just want to use that Panasonic cell that's in a Tesla Model S, if you pulled that out, you'd find a very small amount of silicon oxide that's already present in that cell. The problem is they can only put about 6 or 7% silicon into the cell because of various problems associated with the chemistry of silicon. What we've done as a company, and again, this is from our Northwestern roots and our Oregon roots, we've developed proprietary material chemistry that can solve the problems that exist with this material that's already achieved market adoption. And so what that means for us is instead of only putting 6 or 7% of that silicon material with graphite in the cell that I'm passing around, we can actually get 25, 35, now up to 50% silicon into a cell. And so, when we say we've made the most, energy dense, this is an 18650 cell, by the way. We've made the most energy dense cell in the world. That's because we were able to put more of our material into the cell than anyone else has been able to achieve. Next slide. So this is a slide of a scanning electron micrograph of the material. I think a lot of people just like to see, like, what does this look like under a microscope? And again, you're looking very, very, very small features here. These particles are much smaller than the width of your hair, for example. These are very small 5-micron particles. And again, if you take a look at what we've been able to achieve from a chemistry perspective, we've been able to make a material that is the best in the world. And now we're trying to scale that to achieve market adoption that we're set for this year. Maybe next slide. And so when we talk about the world's most energy dense cell, what does that really mean? Traditionally, what I can tell you, Panasonic, Samsung, the most energy dense cell that they can make tops out at about 3.5 amp hours. I'll translate all this for you in a minute. And 3.8 amp hours represents about a 10 to 15% improvement over the very best cells that they can make. And again, if you want to think about this in terms of electric vehicles, imagine you taking your Tesla Model S, you pulling all those Panasonic cells out. If you dropped our cells into your vehicle, you'd immediately be able to achieve about a 20% increase in range, right? So pretty real difference there. And it's not just electric vehicles. These cells are used in all different types of applications. I'll tell you about some of our first here in a minute. But we're working with a premium consumer electronics company that makes Bluetooth speakers. What we've been able to show is taking their Samsung cell out, drop ours in, you're able to achieve about 50% more runtime. So these are real differences as a customer that you would be able to realize with our cell. And we haven't stopped there. A lot of this has been funded by the U.S. Army. As you can imagine, they use a lot of batteries. I'll talk about that more in a minute, but we've been very fortunate. They continue to fund us to make an even higher energy density cell. So we have prototype cells now that are over 20% better than what Panasonic and LG can make. We're really proud of that. That's a product that we're trying to get to market probably over the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, this is all happening in Chicago, and not just us. There's a whole ecosystem of great battery materials and battery related companies that are really trying to change electrification. Next slide. Yeah, I think this is an interesting slide here because when people think about batteries and the capacity, how much power this can hold, it's generally trended similar to semiconductors, right? You always used to have your little Intel inside and it would be 2.1 gigahertz, and then the next year it'd be 2.4. And so it's a very slow progression of speed and number of transistors in a silicon chip. For a very long time, batteries were exactly the same, very slow progression. What we like to show people is what we've been able to do with our material, dropping it into the cell. We've been able to deliver a decade's worth of capacity improvements in one shot. And if you're thinking about sort of breaking the mold of whatever the battery equivalent of Moore's law is, that's what we've been able to do. And that's why this is so transformative. And that's why silicon's so transformative. Again, 10 years worth of capacity in just one shot. Maybe next slide. I'll go through this quickly. A lot of people ask us about, when we're talking to various cell manufacturers, do they have to change anything about their process? Are there any catches to using this? And we've been working from day one to really make sure that this is truly a drop-in manufacturable material. I mentioned people are already making graphite anodes now. All they do is mix it in with graphite and it does everything else the same. That's been really critical, and that's been feedback that we've gotten from everyone. It works with every other cathode chemistry. Again, I don't want to get too deep into this, but you guys may have heard of things like lithium iron phosphate, LFP, is a new type of material for electric vehicles. Ours works with that. Even some of the newer high nickel, cobalt cathodes. We work with that as well. And again, what we're doing right now in the West Loop of Chicago is scaling this material. We're doing it first to 35 tons. We'll be able to get there this year. By 2025, we need to be at about 1,000 tons per year so that we can start selling into the electric vehicle market. That's the plan. I don't know that we can make 1,000 tons here in Chicago. We'll see, but maybe somewhere close by. Because again, everything is about cost with electric vehicles. The military, premium consumer electronics, they'll pay an extra $1 or $2 for this. Electric vehicle makers won't. And it makes sense, right? There's 7,000 of these in your Tesla. If they all cost $2 more, it's a lot of money. So that's what we're trying to do, is to get this similar performance at a very low cost. Next slide. Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about this because I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to achieve from a technology perspective. But I think for our initial customer, it really is sort of a life or death application for them. A lot of people are shocked to know that when a U.S. soldier goes out on a mission, they carry 100 pounds of gear with them. 20 pounds of that is just batteries. Which is, you think about, tactical radios, night vision goggles, everything is powered by batteries. So to be able to provide them a cell that has a lot more capacity means that either A, they can drop some of that weight and be able to have the same runtime, or B, gives them an extra 6, 7, 8 hours on a tactical radio. That could be, the difference between life and death. And so, I'm really proud that, we'll be delivering these millions of these cells to customers that will be supplying the Army this year. So soldiers will be using these, hopefully not on the battlefield, but whatever they're doing, they'll have these this new technology. Military will be first. I mentioned consumer electronics will be second, medical, and then eventually, we're already working with some electric vehicle OEMs as well to be able to get our technology into your electric vehicle in 2026, 2027. Next slide. And this all sort of fits this big thing. I think what's really been great about the supply chain issue is it's the first thing I can think of in a long time where people on both sides of the aisle agree that we need to bring this back to the U.S. And the government's really put their money where their mouth is in a lot of ways with the infrastructure bill, Inflation Reduction Act, and just for us personally, we've benefited from multiple multi-million-dollar awards that have been facilitated by Senator Durbin, Representative Bobby Rush. There's a lot of strong support here in Chicago and Illinois to make this here locally and to expand this here locally. Next slide. Let's make the last one. This is just sort of a rendition. Again, one of those awards that we were able to get this Appropriation Act, and the one you mentioned earlier, has gone to build this new facility in the West Loop. It's going to house our office. It'll house our R&D and also the production up to 36 tons per year. So if you guys follow up with me, once we move in the next couple of weeks, I'd love to show you around and show you what we're doing here in Chicago. And I just threw this in here. A lot of people, when they hear startups talking about their technology, they're like, oh, this is a science project. We've spent the last 10 years really optimizing the chemistry, optimizing scale up, and now we really are in a position to not only mass produce the material, but we'll be making thousands of cells this month with our partner. And as I mentioned, commercial sales by Q3 of next year. So we'll be making millions of these cells with our material in there, made here in Chicago. Cells aren't made here in Chicago, but the material is made here in Chicago. And so we're really proud of that. I think that's it. Thank you again for the opportunity. I'd love to answer questions.
Do we have any questions in the room?
Well, I'll start with a few questions.
Sure.
So you said that the factory in the West Loop is about to open. I guess maybe the simple question is, where exactly in the West Loop is it located? But then I'm also curious about how many jobs that's creating there in the West Loop. How many folks will be employed by this factory?
Great question. So we use West Loop a little bit liberally to attract people. We're actually on the other side of Ogden, but we're like Fulton Market adjacent. So we're right there at Ogden and Hubbard. So it's over there. It's an old dairy processing facility that we've renovated and turned into what will be not only R&D space, but production space as well. To answer your question, we are 16 people full time, and we're doing a lot with those 16 people. Are accomplishing. We'll double that head count this year, so we'll at least be adding somewhere between 15 and 20 jobs this year, and then exponentially after that. The goal is to actually be cash flow positive by this time next year. We can do that as long as we can execute on the plan, scale the material, make the cells. We have customers lined up now to buy these cells, and hopefully we're looking for exponential growth, and I know a lot of people are looking for that as well. That's what we've certainly promised Senator Durbin and others.
I'm curious, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
do you own an electric car or would you buy one?
I don't own any car. I was just telling them I moved here from San Francisco not that long ago, and I never drove my car, and it was like the best feeling to sell it and just use public transportation every day. Our CEO does have a Tesla Model 3, and certainly I know a lot of people that do have electric vehicles, and I will say they're getting a lot better. I mean, certainly Tesla had a lead for a long time. I just was in someone's Kia the other day, and I was like, this thing it's amazing. So they've come a long way. I think I would certainly buy one. I like to take road trips. The only downside for me is just, if you don't have a Tesla, the charging network, I think, needs a little bit of build out for sure. And I think we're getting there, but I would certainly buy one.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
I was wondering if there are any unintended negative consequences for the environment for what you do, and if so, how those are being addressed.
Great question. Something we think a lot about. I think the one nice thing about being in the anode space and working with silicon is incredibly abundant. It's incredibly cheap. It's non-toxic. I think the thing with battery materials, cobalt has given the whole industry sort of a bad reputation, and rightfully so. Some of the mining practices are pretty bad. I think the good news for folks, batteries are moving away from chemistries that rely on cobalt, and are transitioning to more nickel. And for us personally, everything that we do is fairly environmentally benign. Like, it's funny you asked that. We have a lot of investors who are, we have to do reports for them to talk about our environmental impact. And I'd say in terms of battery materials, we are pretty low on the list in terms of negative impact. And that's something, like I said, we're really always cognizant of and trying to improve, even though we're pretty benign as is. That's a good question, though.
Hi, just thinking about other possibilities for students interested in the field. Are you thinking about offering internships?
We multiple internships every year. Welcome any introductions to smart folks. I'd say when we talk about all the great things about electrification, the supply chain, I think one of the huge challenges that we will have to overcome as a country is training really smart people in batteries, battery production, everything associated with the electric economy. That's one place where Asia is over a decade ahead of us. And so absolutely, if I can encourage anyone, any smart student right now, batteries are going to be here for many decades. I don't know if you heard, I'm kind of a plastics guy, and everyone always laughs about The Graduate from 1960s, and the guy's like, plastics, that's the future. It's sort of funny now we're just trying to get rid of them, which is funny. But batteries are the thing for the next few decades, and I think it's a great place to be. There's always going to be a job, and there's always going to be a need for people with skills there.
So, Chip, there's a lot of discussion these days about keeping innovation in the United States, and what do you think, as obviously a very innovative company, what can the United States do to improve our track record in terms of remaining on the cusp of innovation?
Yeah, innovation is something that America does incredibly well. It's always done incredibly well. I think what we decided to do a few decades ago, for better or worse, was to outsource the manufacturing part of that. And when we did that, we lost control of that innovation. So they're already trying to put things in place to keep the technology here And that means manufacturing things here, right? Which is very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to restart that manufacturing engine in this country. But I think we have to do that to protect the innovation, scale it here. You know, there's also a lot of cost reasons to keep that here. We want to be making materials for batteries here. We don't want to make those in Asia and ship them here. So it's a great question. When we talk to people about the smile curve, you know, what America does great is innovation, and we do great products, right? But the manufacturing, the sort of the bottom part of that curve, we've outsourced for a long time, and I think we're going to have to change that if we want to protect the innovation.
Okay, in the chat, it says, you mentioned automotive companies won't pay $2 more for your anode. However, is there a slight premium they pay? For instance, the company I work for, Roland Berger, does a lot of work with batteries, and we noticed that the electrolyte is almost exclusively made in China. So companies are signaling they pay more for a US made electrolyte.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the answer is some of them will. I guess when I mean they won't pay an extra $1 or $2 per cell, I'm thinking about, and we talk to every EV OEM, right? You know, if this is going into a Ford F-150, no, they're not going to pay more for that. But if we're talking about a Lucid Sapphire, for example, a car that's $250,000 and they want a 550-mile range, they're willing to pay a little bit more for that. So I shouldn't say that there isn't a market for ultra premium performance. I just say for mainstream electric vehicles, yeah, it's very difficult to compete unless your material is as cheap as graphite. That's what they want to see at the end of the day. And that's why we as a company need to get to 1,000 tons per year. That's where we get to that cost parity with graphite. And that's what kind of gets us into that that cost, you know, bracket for electric vehicles. But it's absolutely right. I mean, electrolyte, I don't know if he probably knows this. It was like a worldwide shortage of electrolyte during COVID because everything was being made in China. So we couldn't even do our R&D because we couldn't get electrolyte. So that's how, you know, people don't really understand how far out of whack the supply chain is in terms of all the components needed to make batteries, even solar cells, everything about electrification. We need to be able to move that from Asia to the US, just as a national security concern. A lot of people talk of it in the same way that we used to talk about the oil wars. It's going to become that. Having access to those minerals, having access to finished goods and components that go into not only batteries, but a lot of other things too. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And we always give you a great cup.
I actually just broke my coffee mug at work, so I'm used today.
Thank you very much. We are running a tad behind, well, maybe not. Are there any visiting international Rotarians in the room? Please. Oh.
Hello, I'm Nadia Navarrete. I'm from the Rotary Club of Paraná in District 4945 in Argentina. And as Marga was telling some people today, I've been in Zoom meetings many times, and this is my first in-person time, so it's really great to be able to be here.
Thank you. And everybody else in the room I know, so there are no visiting US Rotarians. Is there any visiting international Rotarians on the Zoom? Please unmute yourself. Okay, any visiting US Rotarians on the Zoom? Okay, great. So Ed, come on up here and tell us about our Rotary Membership League. Surprise.
Way up here.
Way up here.
I'll keep it short. We have a Rotary Membership League. We have 4 teams. We have a pep rally planned for next week. Pep rally is going to be fun. We want to get full team participation. You can see the scores are really getting high here. We got a 1, a 0. Looks like some sort of computer program, like ones and zeros. So it's anyone's game right now. Key point, bring guests. Second key point is ask your guests to see if they'd be interested in the Rotary Club of Chicago. Third point is if they join the Rotary Club of Chicago. And one point, there was one question that was brought up on February 23rd when we have our big birthday party fundraiser. Those points count. So that's a great opportunity to invite guests and really up your score. Now, I did sit with Betsy and Chuck, and they were talking strategy the whole lunch. So we know it's intense. We just need to get it rolling a little bit. So thank you.
And Wes is gonna come talk about our dictionary project.
As some of you are aware, hello, Steve, we're getting out the assignments for the dictionary project. That's kind of a slow process, but as long as you push ahead, if you're me, it gets done. What I'm really trying to do is pair people up because it's much more fun to do as a team. And I try, can't always, to get the schools in places that are relatively close together. I underscore relatively because somehow back when all these schools were assigned to us, there are places where we'll have 2 schools 6, 8 blocks apart, and then the nearest one after that is over the horizon someplace. It's just strange. Regardless, that's how we're trying to do it. If I haven't contacted you and you want to be contacted, by all means, call me up, send me an email. If you haven't contacted me and are on the fence, don't worry, I'll get in touch with you. So this is a fun project. I hope everybody will participate. Thank you.
Okay, and you want to check your gyrator for any upcoming committee meetings. And this wasn't on the agenda, but here we go. Job One Time is here again. For those who don't know, Job One is our signature program that we help Chicago high school juniors and seniors get internships. Internships with Chicagoland businesses. So if you all would like to be a part in helping us recruit students, recruit employers, or help us with our trainings for Job One, please reach out to myself or at the office and they will get you in touch with me. And with that, if we could all stand and do the 4-way test. Number 1, is it the truth? Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Number 4, will it be beneficial to members? And number 5, we will make it fun. Thank you.